This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome to episode 12 of NWA Crock and Roll. I am your host, Sean Kidd, and this is an intro for a very special edition of this episode. One of 3 episodes that will drop this month as part of Starrcade 85, but we had the privilege of interviewing probably one of the most iconic wrestlers of the Crockett era that we're currently in. We've talked about him a lot. He'll be on through the end of this podcast as we go through 88. And I am talking about one Nikita Koloff. And I think it's safe to say, if I go to Dr. G first, welcome, Dr. G. Hello.
This is great.
Yeah, I would venture to say, we won't give away too many spoilers, but I guess I would say it was a hell of an interview, and he's a hell of a guest.
You know what? I've interviewed a lot of people in my, past career and everything in radio and stuff, but I have to say he's right at the top of the list. He was very humble guy, but also liked to have fun. Like he didn't seem like, I have to be here to do this interview. Like he legitimately could not wait to get into the interview and talk. It's like he was like, all right, let's hit record already. Like he wanted to get started. Like he was ready to jump right into this thing. So it was, I was always impressed with him, but I'm even more impressed now. He's just, what you see is what you get. He's a really great guy.
And I would agree. And for Calum McDougall, hello, Calum. How are you?
Good evening.
So the interview turned into something very special towards the end, but we're not going to spoil it because obviously we're recording this intro because we've already done the interview, but after you listen to the interview, stay tuned. We'll have some thoughts after the interview as well. And we could share the special Calum Feels a moment that took place last night. But Calum, what were your takeaways? Not your takeaways, but how did you feel the interview went before we have people listen to it?
I think it went. I don't think we could have asked for a better guest for our first interview like this. The guy he's a, as you two were saying, the guy's a complete gentleman. It was great. I was telling G before we went on last night that I was like so nervous. It was to the point where I thought I was going to lose the ability to speak as I have been known to do when I've been starstruck like that. But within a couple of minutes, you just saw how engaged he was about the whole thing. It was just completely. It put me at ease, and it was just like having a conversation with anybody else on a podcast. It's a fantastic listen. I think everyone's going to thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, and I would also say I'd be remiss if I didn't say, as of this recording, today is Nikita's birthday, and we did not know that when we recorded with him. So Nikita, if you're listening to this now, we wish you a very happy birthday, and I'm sorry we missed that last night, but we hope all of you enjoy the interview as much as we did talking to Nikita. It wasn't even really an interview. It was more of a conversation, and I give him all the credit in the world. So hope you guys all enjoy it. But before we jump into the interview, I wanted to make sure that we did touch on something relatively quick. And I know Scott and Dr. G touched upon it on this past weekend Saturday special. But unfortunately, we had another death kind of in the era of what we're watching right now, and that's one Jim Crockett. And G, what are your thoughts? Obviously, this podcast was born from the Crockett name and Jim Crockett era and what we're watching. So a lot of meaning to all of us. And I know you spent a lot of time talking about it on our Saturday special, but any other additional thoughts you would like to give about Jim Crockett Jr.?
Well, what I really wanted to make a point of, and we talked about, we were trying not to talk about the many things that kind of went wrong during that time, but
correct,
he was very influential in the wrestling industry, especially in the 80s. Listen, obviously we know who the biggest is, and that's Vince, but when it comes to, this is a guy who started, a big pay-per-view. There was something before WrestleMania, and that was Starrcade. And Starrcade and they did the whole closed circuit thing, the start of pay-per-view. So, you know what? Jim Crockett deserves a lot of credit for the good things that he did. Obviously, just because somebody passes you don't just always gloss over like he didn't do anything wrong. And the one thing I loved about the guy, he was humble. If you heard any interviews with him, I know he's done a couple of recent interviews. He takes the blame on the things that he felt where he went wrong. And you have to love somebody that's humble enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, he owned up to what he made mistakes on, but I also think, to your point, it's a very humble person that could say, hey, you know what? I did this, I did that, didn't blame anybody else. But I also, to your point, I mean, we won this podcast. I mean, we would not, I don't think for me personally, I would enjoy professional wrestling as much as I did growing up without Jim Crockett.
No doubt. I totally agree with you.
And so I give him all the credit and love in the world, on par with Vince McMahon for me. And he will, again, a very big loss for the wrestling community, and definitely someone who's Hall of Fame worthy, whatever Hall of Fame he's in, whether it's WWE or any other one. He should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. Calum, what were your thoughts on the passing of Jim Crockett?
It was another one that's terribly sad. We seem to be doing this quite a lot on our show, unfortunately. I think it was a great episode of the Saturday Special going over where Scott and G went over his passing in more detail. And I think it should be, sometimes it might get lost because of how it ended, or how Jim Crockett Promotions ended with the whole UWF and this shouldn't take away from how influential, as you were saying, how influential he was in the wrestling industry. He created for a couple of years some of the best. I'm watching it just now for the first time, but I can hand on heart say this is some of the best weekly wrestling television that I've ever seen. There's been many a great wrestling promoter who has been a bad businessman. I mean, Paul Heyman is on television every single week, and he's possibly a prime example of that. So, again, he's a guy that will fully admit it, and I think Jim Crockett's legacy shouldn't be in. I'm glad to hear that it's not, and everyone's talking really highly of him. Out with how Jim Crockett Promotions ended, his legacy should be what he managed to put on television every single week, and all the guys that he had on his payroll creating this magical wrestling program, as opposed to how like the 4 jets and 4 pilots he had on the payroll. It's just incredibly sad, and obviously his thoughts go out to his family and David and everyone else.
Absolutely. So Jim Crockett, rest in peace, and thank you for what you gave to all of us on this and to the entire wrestling world. So you will be missed. So with that, guys, we're going to turn it over to Nikita, and everyone who's listening, I hope you enjoy it, and we will be back after the interview with some additional thought. Place to Be Nation, welcome to a very special episode of NWA Crock and Roll. It is a privilege and an honor to be here tonight, as we have a very special guest that I think all three of us are kind of, not perplexed, but all kind of in awe, because as we've been doing our podcast, we started in April of 85. We're getting ready to do Starrcade 85 on our next pod after this. So having this guest tonight is a big deal for us. We've talked a lot about him on this podcast as part of the Russians with Ivan and Crusher Khrushchev. I am very happy to introduce a gentleman who has his own podcast. He's in the new video game Retromania. He's an author as well, and I think also managing a team called the Koloff Dynasty. So I look forward to hearing about all this tonight. I love to introduce you to Mr. Nikita Koloff. Nikita, how are you doing tonight?
Hey guys, what a privilege, what an honor to be with you. Shall I just say to all your listeners, Toyota.
I love it right out of the gate. So thank you for that. So Nikita, right from the start, I figure we probably need to start with something probably not necessarily on the positive side, but I kind of want to get it out of the way about Jim Crockett Jr. this past week. I know that obviously you worked for Mr. Crockett for a long time, but I would just love to get your thoughts as we kick this off.
Yeah, I mean, I got the news, and certainly like many, and I'm certain his family, but many in the wrestling world, was saddened to hear, about his loss. And to reflect back, take a moment and reflect back on Jim Crockett Jr. I mean, he was the man who gave me my opportunity. And he's a big part of the reason why I remained to this day loyal to the NWA, loyal forever, to the NWA. And again, because of Jim taking a chance. I mean, it was a roll of the dice. There was no assurance that I was going to be able to do what I did. We had only had, for those who don't know, your listeners who don't know, my introduction into wrestling was through Road Warrior Animal, who last fall passed away as well, right?
Yeah.
But he was essentially, if you want to say, recruited me into wrestling. Don Kernodle had approached approached Animal and said, "Hey, you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian?" And Animal goes, "Oh my gosh, I know the guy right now." And so he made that phone call, and I said, "Well," I go, "Joe, do they know I have no amateur background in wrestling and no professional training, like zero, like nothing?" And he said, I told them, they said they didn't care. And I go, "Well, okay, well, what do I need to do?" He said, "Well, here's a phone number. Call this guy named Jim Crockett." I was like, okay. So, this is back before the days of cell phone, right? And there's no selfies going on or anything. So I called the number. Jim Crockett got on the phone. I had a 5-minute conversation with him and made sure he understood before I drove to a city where I'd never been in my life, Charlotte, North Carolina, that he understood. Again, I had no background, no training, no nothing. He said, "You knew that?" And I said, "You're good with that?" He goes, "Yep." I go, "Well, what's the next step?" He said, "We'll be in my office on such and such a day with your head shaved." I go, "That's it?" He goes, "That's it." I go, "Okay, I'll see you then." Phone, called Joe back and told him the conversation. Had not another word spoken between myself and Jim Crockett Jr. till the day I walked in his office, the day he said to be there. Introduced myself, and he's like, "Take your shirt off." I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of weird, but okay." So I did. He said, "Wait right here." He walked out. He walked back in with two guys, Koloff, Don Kernodle, the world tag team champions, the NWA. And he said, "Take a look at your new partner. Nikita Koloff is born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina on that day." Jim Crockett gave me the break of a lifetime. And for that reason, I opted to not, jump to the WWF or honestly go anywhere else because of that opportunity that he gave me. I'll forever be grateful to Jim Crockett Jr., David, Francis, Jackie, the whole entire Crockett family.
Wow. Yeah. That's the name of our podcast is NWA Crock and Roll. Obviously, it comes from the Crockett name. And that's just great to hear that story. So that was all in 1984, right? When you joined them in 84?
1984. I showed up at his office in June of 1984.
That's amazing. And then to think about, we started in April of 85, from starting in 84 to going in 85, that was just a quick, turnaround. So you explained that Jim Crockett had the idea for the Russian athlete. He just said, "Shave your head," and that's how you became Nikita Koloff, just like that.
Well, a little point of clarity. So it was Don Kernodle and Sergeant Slaughter actually came up with a storyline of a nephew for Ivan, and then they approached Jim Crockett, and he said, he was open to the idea, right? That's just a good promoter, is always, willing to hear, other ideas. Successful promoters do that, and he liked the ideas. I guess, if you can find the guy, I'm interested. And I'll say one other thing too. Jim Crockett, along with Dusty Rhodes, were instrumental in Nikita Koloff turning from one of the most hated guys in wrestling to eventually becoming, a fan favorite. It was Jim and Dusty who took me into a room in Philadelphia one night when I got back from a tour in Japan, informed me of Magnum TA's car accident, and then shared with me the idea of coming to Dusty's aid or rescue in the cage in Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, the rest, for those who know that story, the rest was history, and that changed, that turn as well.
Yeah, and then
that was a great turn, Nikita. I remember back at that time, I was a big Road Warriors fan. So when you turned face, I had a whole group of friends, and we in middle school we just used to sit and watch pretend like we had a little group of like the Road Warriors and Dusty Rhodes, and we just have our own little time, during recess, just being those guys. And when you turned face, we were, oh man, ecstatic. I had a friend of mine that he was the biggest Nikita Koloff fan. I mean, when you turned face, he was like, he wanted to be you. You know what I'm saying? It was so exciting. Because when you're watching wrestling when I love the 80s, in the 80s, when that heel that you really, really couldn't stand, when they turned face, it was like the best thing in the whole world, because it was like you wanted to be on that back because you respected them when they were a heel, but you hated them at the same time because they were doing their job. But when they turned face, it was like, wow, you were just like, that was the best thing in the whole world. I mean, I remember your turn, when Randy Savage did it, Paul Orndorff did it. Those are memorable times where you just you really jumped on that bandwagon because you were such a hated heel that when you became a face, it was like the best thing that could ever happen.
Well, and that's to that point, George, that's really, again, in old school, the old school business was that's the time to turn somebody when they're the ultimate fan favorite or they're the most hated guy, and have the most heat. Because that's when the people least expect it, right? And so that's where you really capture the attention of everybody. And it's pretty funny, too, because I say pretty funny because I'm thinking back on that night in the Coliseum in Charlotte. And once it was after the 1, 2, 3, I'm looking around at the response of the crowd. I mean, guys got their shirts off and they're doing the most muscular, like I would do on my interviews sometimes. And I'm thinking, just a month ago, these same folks were like throwing stuff at me and telling me I was number one in their heart, and now they're chanting my name for 15 minutes. I'm like, this is crazy. Wow.
What did you prefer, Nikita? Did you prefer heel or face?
That's a great question. My honest answer to that is I enjoyed both. I'm thankful I got to experience both sides of it. Because this question sometimes comes up, I'll go ahead and throw it out there now. If Magnum had not had the accident, I highly doubt, believe it or not, that I ever would have turned face. That I would have just, because he and I, had that best of 7 series. I think we would. He was being groomed to be the world heavyweight champion. I think we would have rolled right into a long-term program, for the world heavyweight title, for flag versus flag, of course, the dreaded Russian chain matches, and everything else that he and I had done. And so I enjoyed both sides of it. I'm glad I got to experience both sides.
So full disclosure for me, I was a huge fan when you were a heel, Nikita, as well. The moment that did it in for me, I mean, obviously you're already a part of the Russian team, but when you sickled David Crockett, I just lost my mind in that. That was like one of the greatest things on TV ever that I've ever seen. And I absolutely loved it. So speaking of that, tell the Russian sickle, how did that come up as your finisher? Because that's for me an all-time great finisher.
Well, I guess you'd say from the Russian flag, right? So on the Russian flag is what? A hammer and the sickle, right?
Yes.
And so in my mind, we start talking about a finishing move. I'm like, backbreaker, okay, bear hug, okay, and I knew other guys threw what's commonly called the clothesline, but I started thinking about, if you watch and you notice, most of the time, when I got in that position, I had the arm kind of cocked. That was intentional. So it would kind of look like the sickle on the flag. And so that's where that originated from. For a while, I kind of played around with like a choke slam that I called the hammer. But that didn't look, or wasn't to me as devastating. So that's why I just stuck with the sickle and tried to make it look as devastating as possible.
It's right up there with like the lariat, like Stan Hansen. That's what it reminds me of. It's just a devastating finisher, so it's an all timer. So really, really great.
I'm seeing a lot of this stuff for the first time, and when I had never seen you sickle David Crockett before, so when we've got it on our list of things to watch, and Sean's like, watch this bit. I'm thinking, all right, okay, the Russians are coming on, and then out of nowhere, bang, and you just David Crockett is out like a light. It was just one of the best things I've seen in the podcast so far.
Well, I got to tell you, somebody sent me a clip recently. Tony Schiavone and was interviewing David Crockett on his podcast. Yes, and they're like, hey, we have got to ask you. They go, every other week somebody's asking us about that sickle you took from Nikita Koloff, and it's just. And so David's describing it, right? And he said, you ever playing in the neighborhood when you were a kid at night and you're running through somebody's backyard back in the days when there were actual clotheslines, where people hung clothes on the clothesline, but you didn't know it was there. He goes, that's what it felt like. And Schiavone was funny because he's like, he was on a different set, and all he hears in the headset is, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? He's like, what do they talk about? When's what going to happen? And he said, I knew no sooner got those words out of my mouth and you leveled. He goes, leveled Crockett. He goes, oh my gosh, is he still alive? So yeah,
it looks savage. It looks, and then what's even better about that whole angle, it led to the world title match at the first Bash, and
which was the idea because the story was Crockett and Flair were best friends, and Flair was kind of dodging me, so to speak, and he didn't know wasn't sure he was going to give me the shot. But well, then I'll just take out his best friend. That may upset him enough that he'll go ahead and sign the contract.
Yeah, kind of pulled the curtain back a little bit on that. Like they're friends, and they show you training in the dungeon with Ivan all the time, get ready for the match, and. How did it feel? I mean, so you had been in the business, a little over a year at that point when going into the Bash, or less?
13 months.
13 months.
13 months, almost to the day. And so what's kind of crazy is I've got, in that time frame, again, for your listeners, keep in mind, no training, no background prior to my debut in Raleigh, North Carolina in the Dorton Arena. And now fast forward 13 months, I'm wrestling Ric Flair, the first ever Great American Bash, in front of 25, 30, 35,000 people. And I've already become the world tag team champion, the world six-man champion, and now I'm wrestling the heavyweight for his world title. It's crazy.
It's a great rookie year right there.
How was this wrestling Flair? How it was Flair? Did Flair kind of work along with you during the match? Because this. I mean, he was very experienced by that point. Did you learn a lot from him in that match?
Well, in that and many other matches, and I wouldn't necessarily, George, call it work along with him. I would say I just followed his lead. Let's just see that.
Probably that's better.
He's the consummate professional, right? I say it over and over and over again. Flair could make a broomstick look good because he made the Russian Nightmare look good. And I wasn't obviously 13 months in. I certainly wasn't polished by any sense of the word. And some might say I was never polished, but and that's okay too. My style of working was one that was what I would call snug, what others might call stiff, but that's the way I chose to work.
Wow. So you were in a world title match, and then literally a month later, we transition over. You start doing tag team. You're still in the tag team, but obviously the Rock and Roll Express comes in a month later. Then the Road Warriors come in, and you have these great tag team feuds. So what did you at the time prefer? Did you prefer singles, or did you prefer being in the mix with the tag teams at that time?
Good question. Good question. Again, I guess it's kind of like being on both sides of the track in a sense, in that because I did everything right from singles to tags to 6-man, even to 8-mans, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a few battle royals in the mix there. Those are essentially a night off. But in each one of those matches, it's a totally different dynamic. Obviously, you're in a singles match. The full attention is on you and your opponent. In a tag match, they're the fans centering their attention more on what's going on in the ring. So, and when you're on the apron, you're not necessarily trying to be a distraction from what's going on in the ring. So there's a whole different psychology to each one of those different types of matches. And so here again, I really enjoyed, all of it.
The thing is, back in that time, in Crockett, tag team wrestling was, I think, top notch. I mean, you had some great tag teams along with the Russians. Was there any specific tag team at that time that you really enjoyed working with night in and night out?
Well, I guess the two teams that immediately come to mind that we've already been mentioning, the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors. Now, the interesting thing about those two teams is, as anyone who's familiar with those two teams, two totally different styles. Right?
Just a little bit.
Just slightly, right? Yeah. Slightly different style. I mean, you weren't going to see Hawk and Animal throwing a double drop kick. I'm just saying. Okay. Double clothesline, maybe double drop kick, not happening, So two totally different styles, which then required Ivan and I to work two totally different ways. And that's what we did. So, I enjoyed the variety of what I did. So
as you went into 86, I know the feud with TA started really heating up in January, getting ready to get for the best of, like, it's like a 6-month build, which is incredible. But one question I had in 86, there was a hot rumor at the time that as WWF was looking at WrestleMania 2, that there was rumors that Nikita Koloff was going to come in to face Hulk Hogan at the time. So many of our listeners that asked that question, is that really something that happened? Was that really true? What do you say about that?
Well, there were a lot of, obviously the magazines were hyping it up, right? Hogan against Koloff. And which then only prompted, fans to talk about it. As far as actual conversations, if WWF reached out to me at the time, I missed. They might have left a message on the phone recorder, and I missed it. Right? but to have an actual conversation, no, I did not. I did not have an actual conversation with them. Looking back, would it have made money? Yeah, probably so. I just didn't have a conversation with them about it.
Gotcha. I think it would have made a lot of money. So let's do that justice. I think it would have been probably one of the all-time greatest main events at WrestleMania. Right? Calum, you say something?
Well, and I have a lot of people say that. They really do.
But because and where we are, Tony Schiavone is starting to call you and I love this nickname, the Soviet Union's ambassador of destruction. And I love that nickname. So I'm thinking, if WrestleMania 2 was the Soviet Union's ambassador of destruction against the real American, that would have made. Oh, that would have. Yeah, you could print money at that. But in the end, it didn't turn out too bad. I don't think we missed out on a lot.
Well, here's the reality. If you had gone to the WWF at the time, we probably would have missed out on one of the greatest feuds in the best of 7 series of all time against Magnum TA. And when I started watching, I'll just tell you this: when I started watching wrestling, I was watching WWF, and I was at my grandparents' house in the basement, and he was watching the NWA. I'd never seen the NWA in '86, and it was you and it was Magnum, and you guys you were being interviewed. You guys went at it. We started this whole best of 7, and literally this series is what got me into NWA and into different wrestling. So what was your take, and how did you feel doing this best of 7 series with Magnum? Because for me, this is one of the greatest things that ever happened in Crockett era wrestling.
Well, when I think about, and again, and because Terry and I became great friends, and when I think about it, it's by far it's the number one most talked about part of my career is the best of 7 with Magnum, and so I look back and because our styles were very similar and I had the menacing evil Empire look and of course he had the such a baby face, all American, good guy look. I mean, it just made and the chemistry we had with each other, kind of it just sold itself. And the concept, the idea of a best of 7, kudos to the American Dream, Dusty Roll, the Tower of Power, 2, 3 to be power, if you will. Everybody likes to imitate Dusty.
Well done.
I appreciate it. I've done that a few times, and I rode up and down the road with him for 2 years. So, kudos to Dusty for the creative genius he was to come up with that whole idea of a best of 7.
Yep. George?
Now, Nikita, working with Ivan and coming up with your accents, that's, to me, when you guys at that time, when I was a little kid watching that, you guys were Russian. I mean, we so like when I found out when I was older that you really didn't have a Russian accent, I was like, what? What do you mean? Like that to me, because of course, I didn't know many Russian people at that time, so you only heard what you heard on television. So that was, to me, you guys were Russian. And then to come find out that even Ivan wasn't Russian. So it was like, we were like in shock about that, me and my friends, when we got older.
Well, Ivan lived much closer to Russia than me, for the record. So Vancouver, Canada, much closer to Russia than Minnesota. As far as that goes, but it was he personified it. Yeah, I mean he obviously had many years in really perfecting that character that he had, and then I was just thrown into the fire, so I had to really in a few short months really put it together, to what it would sound like if I really was from there. And as far as words and sentences and did a little bit of homework, a little bit of studying to find out there's, all kinds of dialects from over there and studied a few of the words. I can't speak. I don't speak Russian fluently at all. But I can count to 10 and speak a few Russian words. And then learn to sign my name in Russian, and so there's a few things that I did to try to, if you want to say, perfect the character on my end as well.
Well, I will tell you,
I'll tell you that,
and me as well.
I take that as a compliment, George. I really do. I take that as a real compliment.
So anyway, you turned babyface. Obviously, you already talked about the TA incident, turning babyface, and it was just from there, it's just crazy. So you main event Starrcade with Ric Flair in 86. So, and then you get into 87, you go to the first Crockett Cup, and then you go into War Games. So can you guys just talk about all these things happened right after you became a face with the Flair, the Crockett Cup, and the War Games? Can you tell us about the experiences with all three of those?
Yeah, I mean, of course, Starrcade in and of itself, right? I mean, at the time, the granddaddy, as far as the NWA, the granddaddy of events, Starrcade, and so that was certainly, certainly a memorable moment to be a part of that. Starrcade '86, and of course, I was in Atlanta once again against Flair, and we worked that angle. You talked about building a story. I mean, you talked about the dungeon scene going back prior to the Great American Bash. and even the Crockett, the hitting Crockett and all that. I mean, we spent months building that story without essentially ever even laying a finger on each other. And then you flip it, and now we're building for the Starrcade 86, and again, just continuing the story, running after that world heavyweight belt. So certainly a lot of great memories there. The Crockett Cup in Baltimore, teaming up with Dusty. That was a very, if you want to say, emotional moment, because when that was Magnum's first return back to an arena post accident, and when everyone thought, and including himself, that he'd be a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. Well, he's not, and so it's like he thanks the good Lord for that, probably daily, that he's not, and is very grateful that he recovered as much as he did. But I don't think there was a dry eye in the building that night in the Baltimore arena when he made his entrance down to the ring. And so, of course, that's a very memorable moment, and winning what I felt was a very prestigious, honoring the Crockett family. Once again, the Crockett family, and honoring the Crockett's to have that cup, and some of the family there to present it that night was memorable. And then you mentioned the War Games. I would say the very first one is the most memorable, because nobody knew what to expect. And so we went in with just high anticipation without knowing what to expect. And I can just say it was electric in the building that night. Absolutely electrifying, and how it turned out. And I understand, they're trying to kind of reboot that or whatever. But I will say this for the record: there's nothing like the original. Often imitated, never duplicated. There's just nothing like the original.
Absolutely not. And one thing I'd also be remiss that I think from a historical perspective is there. So I'm going back to '86 a little bit in the cage where Flair and the Andersons attacked Dusty in the cage and set off that whole feud. It really started with the Horsemen, and you were in that cage match, so you were actually a part of history and a part of the Horsemen actually being formed. That was part of the angle.
Yeah, and I would say, you couldn't have. Once again, nothing wrong with some of the later Horsemen that were put. Well, back to the original, Ole and Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Ric Flair. There was just something special about those four in the mix. Now, obviously, Luger came aboard later on and brought a different dimension to the whole Horseman persona. But, man, just something about Ole and Arn and Tully and Rick, and, just their level of professionalism, their ability to perform in the ring. And it could be any combination. It could be going back to a single, a tag, a 6-man, or an 8-man. And in my estimation, you are not going to have a bad match in any of those combinations.
It's funny you brought up the original, because one of the things that we have truly loved. So Calum's just watching this stuff for the first time. He's kind of the student. But Dr. G, we call him Dr. G, but George and I, we have grown such an appreciation for Ole Anderson in this watch. And we talk about Ole and Arn. And you brought up them as the original. Ole Anderson, very underrated. I think he gets kind of a bad rap sometimes because they always say how grumpy he is usually. But him and Arn and you, just the talent you guys had at this time, and the original Horsemen and the Russians and Dusty. And there's nothing better than 1985 and 86 Crockett. It's just an incredible roster.
Well, and here again, you're talking about, some consummate professionals. And when you talk about Ole, I get it. I understand. I've been around Ole, a handful of times. And he's at this stage of life, he's got some real health issues, of his own. Right. And so, it is just something that, you can look, if you're looking for, I don't care who you are, if you want to find something, say something bad about somebody, search far enough, deep enough, wide enough, okay, you're going to find something about everybody. But Ole was instrumental to the industry of professional wrestling, whether it was running Georgia Championship Wrestling or coming aboard the Mid-Atlantic or whatever else. So, my hat's off to Ole.
And we agree with you 100%. We love Ole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely love him.
If I could transition back to sort of 80, well, we're still in 86. You obviously went against Flair at the Great American Bash and then Starrcade. Did you ever hear anything, or was there any consideration of you ever beating Ric Flair and becoming the world champion?
So, Calum, I actually, for the record, I may be the only one. There may be more. I don't know. There may be more. But for the record, Rick actually offered the belt to me on 2 different occasions. And for those who don't know, I took a sabbatical from the business. I had a late wife that died of cancer at the age of 26. She was 24 when it was when they diagnosed it. She battled the cancer for 2 years. Partway through, I made a decision that she was a priority, and I had to leave. I mean, I left the main event position, right, to go take care of her. And she eventually, as I said, passed away at the age of 26. And shortly thereafter, got a phone call from Rick, invited me down to his house in Charlotte. We sat poolside, had lunch, and he wanted me to come back at that time and offer me the world title if I would do that. I respectfully declined. He called me a few weeks later, invited me back down again, and tried to, if you want to say, sweeten the pot a little bit. And I declined a second time. And so maybe one of the only guys to ever turn it down. I don't know. But that's the actual story, and have no regrets in turning it down, nor do I have any regrets of never having won it. So great question.
So as we get into 87, you brought up Luger, the U.S. title feud, which is also an all-timer, the cage match. And then you went on and won the TV title and unified the UWF TV title. So tell us how did you feel about, the feud with Luger, then transition to the TV title, and then eventually unifying the TV title and being the final kind of like you were a unified TV champion of 2 promotions.
Yeah. Terry Taylor, Chicago, against Starrcade, right? As far as the unification match was concerned, beat Tully for the belt. I think in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I think I beat Tully. Held it for quite a while. I don't, I know they track a lot of that stuff. So I held it for quite a while, and it was certainly happy to be the world television title holder, and then unify those belts and be the winner and walk away with both belts. Still have the UWF, the original UWF belt in my possession.
It's in your picture on your podcast, right? That's the belts you're holding?
That is correct. That's the actual belt from 1987 in Chicago. That is right. That's awesome. Yep. Okay. And for the record, there's been a lot of great TV champions. You mentioned some names already: Tully Blanchard, Arnie Anderson. There's been some really great NWA TV champions that preceded me.
And how did you feel about the feud with Luger going into the summer of '87?
I enjoyed working with Lex. I really did. A lot, again, people can say what they want. Some look at him and with a favorable light, and others don't. But and of course, you guys probably all know. We're the best of friends now. In fact, we do a camp together called Man Camp that we co-facilitate together. And we'll be doing one coming up here in April, and we've done a lot of ministry work together since the wrestling days, and I've had the privilege of mentoring him over the last number of years. But backtrack to the wrestling days. I'm on record to say I'm maybe one of the few guys that actually liked Lex. There's a bunch of guys who will say, that they did not like Lex Luger. But I joke with them. I'm like, Lex, I think I'm like the only guy, maybe one or two, Sting maybe being another, that actually liked you, Lex. But and to his own admission, he was a pretty arrogant guy in those days. And, I would even say, kind of stuck on himself, if you will. And in one sense, he had the body and certainly you might say earned the right in a sense to have the attitude he had when many guys didn't put in the work that he did to look like he looked. And so I would say he kind of, had you might say the privilege of touting what he achieved. And so I look back at those matches and I feel like we had some really outstanding matches. We kind of matched up well against each other. And I feel like we gave folks their money's worth when he and I stepped in the ring against one another.
You did. I certainly wasn't a fan of him in that cage match when he beat you, by the way. That's one of the I hated it.
He cheated. Well, he cheated. Well, wait a minute. Somebody might say, well, so did you. I go, yeah, well, no, the referee caught you. Did I? No.
It was all Dylan's fault. Throwing the damn chair.
It was JJ Dillon. JJ, I've not forgot about that, by the way. Don't turn your back on me.
Now, with Lex now in current times, was it within the last 5-10 years? I know that he's had a rough time personally, through being sick and even serving some jail time and stuff like that. Was that when you guys, kind of got close again?
Yeah. So it's an interesting story to give your listeners just a little short snapshot of that. So we have this wrestling career. Of course, I leave wrestling the tail end of 1992. I saw him briefly in Charlotte in December of 1995, and then would not see him again until June of 2006. So it was about just a little over a decade that we had not seen or talked to each other. And where we were reunited was at a conference, a Christian athletes conference in Phoenix, Arizona, just a couple months prior, after his last stint in jail. A jail chaplain led him to the foot of the cross, and he had surrendered his life to Jesus. And then he came out with the chaplain to that conference, and we were reunited. And there was just an instant connection there. I mean, I'm not even going to say we picked up where we left off. It was even better than when we left off, because when we left off, we were just both in a different place at that point. And so I began a process of seeing him on a very regular basis and meeting with him. He was living in Atlanta. About a year and a half after that, he had that very serious spinal cord, paralyzed from the neck down. And like Magnum, he was supposed to have been a quadriplegic for the rest of his life, lifted out of a bed, fed, shaved, and the whole 9 yards. And it's really he's a miracle, like for real, because he went to the Shepherd Spinal Center in Atlanta, and he's part of a very small group of people who ever, under their own power, walk out of the Shepherd Spinal Center. He has that miraculous story. Now, like Magnum, he never fully regained, all of his body. And so it wasn't necessarily that he had been sick as much as he had this kind of a freak injury. And so since that time, losing 100 pounds of body mass, but I have been with him. In fact, he lived with me for about 10 months in 2015. That's actually where the man camp and these man up conferences that we do, that's where that was birthed. A vision for that was birthed when he lived with me. And we just, as I said, he's like I call him a peak performance partner. We kind of iron sharpens iron. We kind of learn from one another and really have, when we're together, it's just always a phenomenal time. In these camps, man, we're together with men in these camps, and we just have just an amazing time together.
So while we're talking about the camps, can you tell us a little more about what the man camps are while we're there?
Yeah, it's essentially in a nutshell, and you know, your listeners can go to mancamp.info, mancamp.info, INFO, and learn more about it. But in a nutshell, our goal, our objective, he and I combine our many years of experience. You know, I tell people he and I aren't experts in anything, but you know, I've got 50 years experience in health and wellness. He's got about the same amount of time in health and wellness. I mean, remember his chiseled body. He's got a lot of knowledge and information to share. And I've got a lot of experience. And then, you know, it's like one of the books I wrote was called, it's on my website in my store, called Wrestling with Success, Developing a Championship Mentality. And so he and I, again, combine our experience of what it takes to become a champion, or you might say successful in life. And we share some of that insight with the guys who come to the camp. And last but not least, you know, this spiritual journey that I've been on since 1993. He's been on since 2006. We've experienced. So our goal is to send men home to be healthy and or healthier than they already are, physically, emotionally, mentally, and then of course spiritually, and so that they can just, you know, be equipped to be as successful as they would desire to become. That's it in a nutshell. The Man Camp.
So it's a Man Camp, and then it kind of leads into from that, you know, and we have lots of other questions, but I want to make sure I ask you about this stuff. Because it's I think it's important, and so your podcast. So your podcast is called Man Up, and it's funny, we were talking about Magnum. I think the most recent edition he was on. So I listened to it. It was fantastic. So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, and you know, like guys, like many things in my life, it's interesting. We can probably all relate to this. Some of your listeners will probably relate to this. You know, there's many things in my life that I just wasn't on my radar. I mean, wrestling honestly was not on my radar. I mean, you know, as a kid growing up, I wasn't like many of them or some of them, I wasn't like, oh, I want to be a professional wrestler one day. That wasn't a dream for me personally. Professional football was a dream, but not professional wrestling. But a door of opportunity opened up, and I became one. I mean, after I left wrestling, I found myself at an altar 11 months later, surrendering my life to the Lord. And next thing you know, I'm traveling around the world as an evangelist, as a minister, you know, sharing the good news. Again, if you had asked me 35 years ago, you know, would I be doing that? I would have emphatically said, what? No, you know. And so a year ago, Stu Epperson from Truth Radio Network called me up randomly one day. We had only met a couple times at conferences. And he said, I need to come down and talk to you. So he drove down, spent 3 hours at my house and said, you need a weekly radio show and you need a podcast. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, interestingly enough, I've been thinking, how can I get my voice out there and impact more people in a positive way? Well, hello, a radio show and a podcast, because that can take my voice around the world, right? And so we launched it last fall. It's called the Man Up Podcast. It's on all the major platforms, about 75 different platforms. And I kind of take it off the conference that's called Man Up Conference, and we say it's time to man up. And so fast forward just a few months later, guys, that podcast so far has been downloaded into 30 different countries.
Wow.
Including Mother Russia. Hello. Yes.
I would hope so.
Exactly. Including Mother Russia. It's downloaded there. And a bunch of countries I've never even heard. I mean, I'm like, Sri Lanka, where is that? I had to look some of these places up, right? So anyway, so it airs on the radio station across the Carolinas and Virginia, and we're looking to syndicate that thing nationwide. And I'm not satisfied with 30 countries. I'm not going to be satisfied till that's downloaded in 100 different countries. And people will enjoy it, I believe. You talked about listening to Magnum. You know, I did a 2-part interview. I don't know if you listened to the interview with Sting yet or not, but I did a 2-part interview with Sting, Lex, Jackson Riker, from WWE,
Yep.
Monday Night Raw, interview with Jackson, and many others. It's not just celebrities. I mean, I interview businessmen and women, and just to hear their stories. I interview, of course, people in ministry. So it's just a whole variety of people sharing their story, man, and we just have fun. Kind of like you guys are letting me do tonight. Share my story.
Well, and it's also a really quick, easy listen because it's usually about 30 minutes, right? And it's just a good listen to it's inspiring. You hear good stories. It is a really good podcast. So,
hey, one quick side note.
Yep.
And I want to encourage your listeners and anybody else who will hear this podcast. I added a special segment to it. It's kind of it's in addition to, called Q&A with Koloff, questions and answers with Koloff. And here's what I do. I tell people, I go on my website, koloff.net, go on my website, submit some questions, and they can be about anything, and submit some questions. If you're available when I'm in studio, I'll give you a personal phone call, and I'll answer your questions in person, and we'll upload it on the podcast. It's called Q&A with Koloff. So for all your listeners out, man, if you want to talk to me directly and ask me some questions, be about wrestling, life, ministry, whatever, submit your questions, koloff.net. I'm loving all the questions I'm getting.
I think, I'm sure there's 3 of us on here that'll take you up on that because we're going to run out of time for all the questions we got. This has been fantastic. So, Calum, before we started the pod tonight, you were encouraged to ask a question about something. Would you like to do that right now?
Yes. So I was told I need to ask you a question about. I believe you got a story about Scotland.
I do. And Calum, for the record, I love your voice, bro. Like for real, right?
Well, full disclosure, that's why we have him on the show.
I'm having to really listen carefully to what you're asking, however, but I love your voice. All right, Colin, so here's the deal, okay? I don't know what clan you're a part of, but there's a chance we might be related.
Excellent.
Okay, so
you're gonna make him pass out.
I'm gonna pause right there and let you think about that. I'm gonna let everybody go. What the heck's he talking about? I call him. Ready? Here you go. So my mom was born on the English town called the Hayden outside of Carlisle. Ever heard of Carlisle, England?
Yep. Yep.
So she was born in a little village called Hayden. And so I remember, here's the story. I remember back in my younger days, I always had an affinity for the Scottish bagpipes, and I could never figure out why. I'm like, why is it? I mean, I even bought like the music, you know. Of course, Amazing Grace is my favorite on the bagpipe, right? But I'm like, why? And check this out. In 9th grade, one of my first mentor was a guy named Bill Burke, my 7th grade football coach. But in 9th grade, I met Jerry McFarland. How's it? What's that name sound like?
That sounds like it's very local to me.
Jerry McFarland, a good Scotsman. And he became my second mentor. He was a health teacher, and he was a professional bodybuilder. And he played the bagpipes, and he'd play it for me, right? And I loved it. This is all before I knew that my mom was born on the border up there. And then we took a trip when my mom passed a few years ago. My sister, my brother, my brother-in-law and I, we all took a trip to England, spent a few days in London, took the trolley, took the train up to Carlisle, rented a car, actually went across the border into Scotland so I could say I've been in Scotland, right? We did some research, and I found the clan I was a part of, and actually while in Scotland, I bought my kilt. I bought the whole 9 yards, bro, like for real. Oh. I've got it in the closet, the shoes, everything, right? And then we toured all around different little villages and found a lot of the ancestors and a lot of the graveyards and had the most phenomenal time. So we might be related, Colum. I don't know. We'll have to find research.
But I'm just from now on, I'm just going to say that we are.
There you go.
I love it. I love it.
I think.
By the way, Hey, by the way, you guys honestly are really the first ones to ever hear that story in that kind of detail ever. You're the first.
Well, we appreciate that. I think Colin's going to have to do a name change now. I'm going to call him Calum Koloff is what we're going to call him from now on.
It's got a good ring to it.
It's got a really good ring to it, actually.
We can make you an honorary Koloff. Come on.
Speaking of honorary Koloffs, as we get ready to wrap up, what can you tell us about the Koloff dynasty as we get ready to wrap this up?
Well, Alexander and Neil. All right. So just a kind of a summary to Alexander and Neil. Did a little homework there. I was approached, a couple years ago about extending the Koloff legacy, beyond Uncle Ivan. And for the history buffs, go back, YouTube, and research back into the 1930s. There's actually a wrestler by the name of Dan Koloff back in the 1930s. Wow. And so my understanding, I didn't know this at the time. I've come to kind of research this, and I believe that's where Ivan actually picked up the Koloff name, was from Dan Koloff. And Dan was a shooter, man. I mean, he was like the real deal. He was MMA before MMA, like for real. And so go research Dan Koloff. And then Ivan Koloff comes along in the 60s. Nikita Koloff comes along in the 80s. And so I thought, what could be more honoring for Ivan and even Dan than to extend the Koloff name? And so I was approached. I scouted these guys. They're not newbies. I mean, they've been in the business 15 plus years, so they're very schooled, experienced, and are great grapplers. And so I was familiar with their style. Took them down to NWA Power back in 2019 and debuted them as themselves, and then worked with them in the gym and in the ring. And at one point, we did some video vignettes. We kind of put it out on social media. And the last one being, I christened them because of I felt that they were worthy of being christened with the Koloff name. And so hence Alexander Neil Koloff / Koloff Dynasty. And who knows? We'll see if we get some traction with it. And we're just going to have a little fun, even if it's just on the independent scene. We're going to have and have some fun with being their corner. So we'll see where all of that goes.
It would seem to me it sells itself. Any chance we might see you guys on the new NWA that's coming back here shortly? I knew George was going to go there, so I went there first.
I don't know. Well, we will see. We will see. It's not like we feel like if someone sees that there would seem to be some natural angles there, obviously with my love for the NWA and my history there, there's some. Let's face it. There's a couple of natural angles with what's it called, AEW or something like Cody Rhodes. Arn Tully. Who knows? We're open to see what doors of opportunity might open. And if none do with the bigger promotions, then we'll just have a blast on the independent scene.
Well, if Tony Khan or Billy Corgan's listening, I think they should take you up on some of that, actually. So
I don't watch a lot of AEW. But if I might become converted if I turn on one night and I see some sickles getting thrown around.
Well, we're going to see what happens, right? We're going to see what happens.
All right. So we're kind of at the end of our hour. So before we wrap it up, George or Calum, anything else for Nikita before we end this?
I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this, because this, you're one of my heroes growing up watching wrestling, especially during the Crockett years, and to be able to sit here and just chat with you and have some fun, it's been an honor and a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for doing it, because we're really, really loving going back on this podcast, and I have to thank Sean for bringing this idea up of going back to probably the best time in Crockett history. And you're a part of it, a big part of it.
Well, I appreciate it, George. Many of the fans, and I still get out there, doing the autograph signings and virtual signings and face-to-face. I'm a face-to-face guy. I love to hear the stories from the fan, hear their story, your stories now. And And many of them say, it was the golden era of professional wrestling. And I feel honored to have been a part of it and even to have this time to share some of my story with you guys tonight. I appreciate you guys as much as you might appreciate me. So thank you, George. I appreciate that. Calum, my Scott blood brother.
By the way, if you haven't noticed, he's already changed his name on the chat.
He did. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
Just for me, I mean, it's from 10, 15 years ago watching Nikita Koloff on Classic WCW, and then even a year ago, if you'd told me a year ago when we started this podcast that I'd be sitting here tonight doing this, I would have probably called you a liar. This has been fantastic. So thank you very much for coming on, and I'll see you at the next family reunion.
Yes. Hey, one of these days I'm going to get over to Scotland for real, and hopefully we can meet face to face, Calum, face to face. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm all in for that. Don't you worry.
Awesome. And thank you, Sean. Thank you for setting all this up, and just to all your listeners out there. I really, a heartfelt thank you for being the fan. I say it all the time. I mean, I say that the wrestling fan is the absolute greatest on the planet, and I mean that sincerely. And I appreciate you setting this up, Sean.
Again, I'll just echo what the guy said. This has been a privilege and an honor for me, especially because, like I said, my first watch of NWA was literally you and Magnum. So this is kind of like a dream thing for me doing this. So hopefully maybe one day we can have you back on. But in the meantime, I'm going to take you up on that Q&A, and I'll probably ask you through there. So thank you so much, Nikita. It's been great having you on.
No, absolutely. And to all the listeners, check me out on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Nikita Koloff, #1 behind it, and Facebook. If you're looking for me on Facebook, look for the one Standing in the River. I don't know if you guys seen this or not, but I'm standing in the river with $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and another friend of ours. It's actually the Jordan River in Israel. We were visiting each other in the Jordan River. That's the real me, or the real me on Facebook. And then and be sure to check out the websites, Koloff.net and mancamp.info, and check out the store. We're adding new things all the time. I got my book on there, Nikita, Tell the Ring of Redemption, which is my life story, and we're adding more stuff all the time. So thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. We didn't even bring up the video game, but we'll save that for another day because you
Retromania.
That's right. I know currently Calum Koloff is playing against Nick Aldis to win the world title with you. I already know that for a fact. So
I love it, Calum. I love it. Thank you.
All right, Nikita. Thanks again. Have a good night.
All right. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
So everyone, welcome back. That was our interview with Nikita. I hope you enjoyed it nearly as much as we did. I am going to actually start with one Calum McDougall, who obviously we're going to change his name after the interview, and we are officially anointing him Calum Koloff. So, Calum, why don't you tell us about your big fanboy moment from the interview?
Sean Kidd, Dr. G. I am now Calum Koloff. And that was what can I say? I mean, the whole speechless just thinking back on it now. I mean, it's not even 24 hours, or just about 24 hours has passed on it, and it still feels a bit surreal. It's just unbelievable is what I can say. So I hope everyone enjoyed the. I hope everyone enjoyed the whole interview as much as I enjoyed the last 5 minutes there. Just excellent stuff.
I think it was the last 5 minutes were definitely a great run and a great way to end it. But, I mean, a lot of stories in that, and I loved how he just flowed through it all. He talked about his beginnings in '84, and, for me, what really stuck out to me is how you put it in context in his first 13 months in the business. He didn't know anything in wrestling, comes in, told to shave his head, joins the Russians, becomes a world tag team champion, a 6-man champion, fights Ric Flair at the first bash, all in his first 13 months in the business. And then, we got to talk about the big moment that we all loved. I think we talked about, one of the greatest moments of this pod so far when he sickled David Crockett. He talks about his relationship with Lex Luger. I mean, there was just a lot of good material in there, and we didn't really get to everything we wanted to talk about. So I'm hoping one day we can get it back on. But Dr. G, what did you think? What was your takeaways from the interview?
The one takeaway that I never knew about, and, I've heard a lot of interviews with him, or, what have you, is that he was offered to be world champion.
Yes.
That he met with Ric Flair. I thought that was, and twice he turned it down twice, and I never realized that. And to be honest with you, he would have been a great world champion, I think, for that time. And your the analogy you made with possibly going to WWF at the time for WrestleMania 2. Wow. I mean, could you imagine that would have definitely been one of the biggest buy rates, I think, if he had come to WWF at that time for WrestleMania 2. Wow. Because that whole thing with US and Russia at that time was so hot. It really was. Those anytime you had a feud with that, obviously it was going big in Crockett, and then you did have it with with Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, in the WWF. But boy, Nikita was such a monster. He really was. And for a guy that had no experience, what I love about it? He's humble about it. He's like, I don't consider myself a great wrestler. I mean, I was learning on the job. So,
yeah,
just a great guy. I loved it. It was I think I had a mark out moment, but nothing like Calum. I mean,
well, I got
a brand new cousin.
Well, I had a mark out moment myself. It was kind of like, if as a kid when you're like 13 watching this stuff, and for me it was a huge like dream moment for me. It's kind of like meeting one of those like guys you just grew up watching, and I totally marked out last night. I think Calum will tell you, and I know he's about to say something, but I had a hard time falling asleep after talking to him. But Calum, you were going to say something else?
I was going to say, I mean, you've got your podcast persona, Sean, is that you're a bit of a grumpy git, but you were grinning from ear to ear. I can imagine that your cheeks must be sore this morning when you woke up, because we were all the same. We just never stopped grinning from the moment that he came on, and it was the thing that shocked me as well was when he said that he had no training, no amateur background. His first training session was right before he started. His first training session was after he started with Jim Crockett Promotions, and people always talk about Brock Lesnar, and it was on Twitter today about Kurt Angle's first year in the business being the greatest, but in many respects Nikita's is probably far more impressive, because he went from nothing to having, and we watched the Bash match, and he's managing to get the crowd riled up to the point that there has to be police stopping the fans from entering the ring. There was a fan entered the ring. He sold out a stadium in Jim Crockett country with Ric Flair, all within 13 months. So I think in many respects Nikita Koloff's first year in the business is much more impressive than Kurt Angle's. I think they deserve it. They're both right up there. They deserve to be talked about in the same vein, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the last thing I will say is, not only telling great stories, but also, telling some personal stuff as well. He talked about his wife that he lost at a young age, and talked about that when it walked away from the business. To Dr. G's point, none of us knew that Ric Flair offered him that world title, which is absolutely incredible. And he walked away from that. He brought up Lex Luger. That's just another thing. I had no idea Lex Luger lived with him for 15 months either. That was a really insightful thing. So it wasn't only a story about the wrestling business. I think he told, basically, I love the fact that he shared what he's doing today and the things he's got going on. I also love that he shared personal stories of, just impactful things beyond the wrestling realm. So, Nikita, thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to talk to you again. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you again one more. Again, we only got to half our questions, but we were so enthralled with what we were listening to and discussing. And yes, we were all on Zoom and we were all on camera, and Calum's absolutely right. I think we were all grinning ear to ear for a solid hour. So, again, great stuff, and happy birthday, Nikita. So, with that, we'll talk about what next week's episode is. So like I said earlier at the intro, we're going to have 3 episodes this month as part of Starrcade 85. So next week on episode 13, we are going to do a special watch. I'm calling it Crock and Roll, episode number 13, Starrcade 83 and 84, before Crockett. And technically, were they with Crockett? Yes. However, it is before our podcast started. We started in April of 85, and these obviously took place in 83 and 84. So basically what we did is I went through those and picked wrestlers that we have watched during our podcast run so far and the matches they did at Starrcade, and we're going to talk through those matches that are Starrcade 83 and 84. And our special guest will be one Jacob Williams. Not Jacob, Jambalaya Jake. Again, Jake has been on this podcast. I think this will be his third time, guys?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think this will be Jake's third time on this show. So look forward to having Jake on. He's always fun, always gives good perspective, and he always has a good time when he's doing these podcast watches. So with that, Dr. G or Calum, anything else you would like to add to this episode of Crock and Roll before we say goodbye?
I just say thank you for organizing this, Sean.
Calum, anything from you? Oh, you're welcome. I did. Don't thank me, man. This was for our audience and for us to be. I mean, honestly, what better mark out moment would you had? I mean, it's kind of selfish reasons too for me.
We have Calum Koloff. Yeah. It's better than that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Sean, for reuniting me with a long lost cousin. I'll try and arrange to see if you can be my +1 at the next family reunion, with me and Nikita. Gee, I'll get you in as well. That won't be as tough a sell.
All right. Well, moving forward, we will refer to you as Calum Koloff on this podcast. So just be prepared. So for myself, Dr. G, and the newly anointed Calum Koloff, I'm Sean Kidd, and we will see you guys next week.